All right, there we go. All right, Pimp, let's do this. As usual. Let me get your glass. All right. I'll send this link to JP here shortly. All right, everyone. So today I have Joseph Powell, JP, and I have Raymond Barrera, and he and I will be co-hosting, asking Joseph a series of questions because of his memories and experiences that are extremely unique. So I don't know if you want to reintroduce yourself, Joseph, with just a quick rundown of a bio, but if you want to just tell everyone, hey, and just go over a couple things about you, and then he and I will start.
Sure. Well, my name's Joseph, obviously. I've technically I'm a government hybrid, I guess you would say. I've also been in different projects such as let's see, pull it up real quick, like Project Ibis. I've also been a part of Black Manta, the Merchant Marine Fleet. I've served in Notchwaffen, and I've also served in Solar Warden. I've also served on the Ashtar Command, and pretty much sums up most of it for the most part that I can remember at this point. I've also, I mean, other than the fact that I also have some memories of Montauk.
That's the New York base, right?
Yeah.
The one Peter Moon wrote about and Penny Bradley talks about. Okay. Well, you've been very busy lately, and I want to thank you. Peripheral note, I just want to say thank you so much for giving so much testimony out. I love listening to you. I love hearing all this stuff, man. To me, it's practical knowledge, but there's such a glare with these glasses. And it helps me understand what happens, I guess, after life, or what's really happening, layers above what's going on in politics today, that it's so hard to get information. You know, I really wish there was some sort of council that everyone in the SSP, of course, they'd be vetted very heavily. And then once allowed in, they could be some sort of a advisory board for the government, or y'all just have some sort of practical implementation other than having all these useful memories. I say useful, some might be painful, but a grasp of what goes on greater than this earth, and then basically having to deal with naysayers and or being suppressed. So it just hurts to know that there's just not enough avenues or institutions to facilitate this message that you and others like you, Penny Bradley, things like that, you know, can advise people. I really think that y'all should be teaching in schools, you know, or the government should be paying y'all for all the trauma that you went through. But like I always like to do is, if we can just go over again, how did this all start? So, you know me, I love to just try and bridge for all skeptics. So you're a normal guy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of memories that hit you all of a sudden? Or how did you know all this happened? Because it's not like you can snap your fingers and make a Notchwaffen ship just appear above your house and let everyone look, you know, that has eyes to see, you know?
Yeah. So basically how it started was, for me, from the memories that I originally had, was when I was around the age of 8. Okay, those were the earliest memories I had of what was going on. And I remembered being basically groomed in school to be a part of this program. And what they did is they sifted through all the kids that were in my class.
What school? If you don't mind me.
That was the Desert Adventist Academy.
Desert Adventist Academy?
The Desert Adventist Academy, yeah. Basically, the teacher that I had, from what I can come to at this point, the realization I've come to is that she was an MK Ultra asset. So she was already pre-MK Ultra when she was probably a child at that point. I don't know her whole life story. I know that she's dead at this point. But basically, she had an altar that they would bring forward, and then she basically would bring the kids into a separate room that they originally used for, say, canned foods, like collecting canned foods and stuff. And instead of that being what that room was for, they started putting computers, made a computer lab basically in the room. And then they had this guy show up after I'd been talked to, like, I think it was like a week or 2 weeks prior to that. And he basically had us answer a few questions on this computer. And then we played this game. It was, I think it's called Pong, but it's an old Atari game, but they actually had it on the computer.
That moves and the ball bounces. It's like this geometric kind of.
Yeah, so basically they were having us do that, and then they would add more and more and more to see how our eye-hand coordination was. And then all the kids that started like losing, they would remove those kids out of the class. Originally, they would replace them with other kids until they basically narrowed it down to where there was only 8 of us. And they really narrowed it down when they started having us close our eyes and play with our eyes closed. So they were trying to have us use our basically our psychic abilities, which was like remote viewing, I believe it was. There might be a different word for it, but we were able to play with our eyes closed. And then if you couldn't keep your eyes closed, the instructor that we had, who was a programmer basically, would come around. He would put tape on your eyes. So he would tape your eyelids down, which he had to do with me because I kept trying to open my eyes. After a while, we were able to play without our eyes being open. They narrowed the class down, and then they started fracturing us. They started putting using VR headsets on us, and the images that we would see, like what I saw, I don't know what the other kids were seeing at the time, but I was seeing images of being pushed off a cliff, drowned in an ocean. Every time I would hit the water, the guy that would be our programmer would walk around and spray us with a water bottle. So he'd walk around the room, and when it hit that point, he would spray us with a water bottle so that we would feel like we were there. They also had other stuff attached to us, like a heart monitor, like a portable heart monitor. So they were monitoring not only our heart beats, but they also had it hooked up so they can monitor our brain waves. So that was actually going on too. And then in the middle with the VR, eventually what would happen would be they would have basically flashes of a woman and a man having sex. And it would go back to, being pushed off a cliff and stuff. And then eventually it would flash her, this woman climaxing. And then after that, it would go back to the same thing. And then it would flash with the man basically stabbing the woman when she was in the process of climaxing. And I remember, like, when that happened, the first time I saw it, I took off the headset because it hurt my head. And I looked around, and all the kids in the class, like I've said before, like if you go and you watch, say, Mark Zuckerberg, when he was like standing in the room with all the people with the VR goggles on, and he was walking down that area, and you just see all these people just sitting there, just zoned out, like zombies, basically. That's what it looked like with the other 7 kids that were in the class. Most of them never took off their headsets. They followed orders without even making any problem. Once they broke us, like fractured us and stuff, because it wasn't just that. Like there was a point that I came to where I actually got more memories back, where after they started doing this stuff, I remember military coming to my house in the middle of the night, and they looked like shadow men, but they basically picked us up. They picked me up, and they would take me to this underground base. I don't have much memories of it, but I'm pretty sure at that point that's where I was being raped and other things were happening. But at that juncture, once they fractured me, then they started hooking these electrodes up to my temples, and they would have me read off these. First, they had me write down like 10 names. Okay, so the guy basically had me write down 10 cool names. That's the way he put it. To write down 10 cool names. So I sat there and I would write these 10 cool names down, and I came up with a bunch of different names. Most of them started with J, with J's, and most of them were biblical names. For the most part, because I was in a religious family, and they were all about biblical stuff. So I have like an alter name, John, which that just came from my brother because my brother's name is Jonathan. So I basically put John for short. And then there was Jonah, so far I've gotten that. Um, I got Jimmy, which is another altar. Then there's Pindar, which is totally separate. That deals with something totally different. I actually got a telepathic communication when I was in the process of writing that. That like I basically was contacted telepathically and told to write down the name Pindar. Um, and then there's another one. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the heck that name was. So hold on. There's another one that I haven't named yet, but I know that he's like, I basically call him number 42. Um, and then I have an altar that's named Joseph as well, but it has like they all have sequence. So they have a sequence of numbers, a long amount of numbers, and then it says the name, and then you would say activate or deactivate, and that's how they bring your altars to surface. Trying to think of what the other name is. I can't think of the other name off the top of my head, so I'll just bypass that now. But after they got us after they figured out the names, then what they did is they had me read off this cue card, and when I was reading it, it would have a list of numbers, and then it would have the name. And if I didn't read it properly, the guy would electrocute me. Basically, it would shock my temples, and it was really high voltage. And I remember like crying and like asking why he was doing it, and I didn't understand. And you know, and then there was just points where he would just shock me just because. So it was like I
Sick.
think they were trying to create. Not only was he trying to create an Omega program, but he was also trying to make sure that he got the right altars attached to the right names. I'm assuming. Um, but then from there, we would have these nap times, and I would be picked up from my teacher would basically have all the students in her class have nap times, and there would be a guy that would show up with his partner, and I've basically some people would call them handlers. I call them basically a trainer. um, and what they did is they used this device that would, when you go to sleep, it would put you into a certain mindset, like delta, beta, theta, uh, brain waves. It puts you in a certain one where they could give you directives, and you would basically get up from from sleep and just be like a zombie and just walk wherever they tell you, and you just follow orders. So I would walk out of the class. The teacher was a part of this process. So I would just walk out of class. I would walk out the front door. I would normally be the last kid out. Like every time that I came to, because there was like I think it was like two times so far that I can recollect where I actually came to and came out of the trance, but it was really strong. So it was like you would still be put back into it. So I would like black out and then come back and then black out again. One time I came to when I got in the van, and I was being told, to shut the door and then put on my seatbelt, and it freaked me out because I didn't know who the heck this person was. So around that time I was being taught about stranger danger and stuff like that. So I started screaming, and there was other kids that were in the van with me. There was 7 other kids, and they started getting loud because they were still zoned out of their minds. And it looked like they were all doped out, but I don't think that they had given many drugs at that point. But when I started making noise, it started freaking them out. It was like a collective uh, feeling almost, So all these other kids were just like, when I started freaking out. And this guy, he really was ruthless. My first trainer was a ruthless dude. He didn't really like me, and I always gave him problems. So he really hated me. And like if I acted up, he would either hit me, drug me, or later on, it got to the point where like I had a fist fight with him when I was like I think like 12 or 14. Like I ended up having a full-blown uh hand-to-hand combat with him until he threatened to kill my family. um but that's what would happen. I would be picked up from school, then I would be driven, and right before we got to like say LAX, we would get off the freeway, and there's this area that's right before you get off the freeway to LAX that is a government ran facility, and they have a jump gate basically. So we would get taken to that jump gate. We go to this parking garage, get out of the white van. All of us would. Normally, they would have us change when we were there. So we would either change into the uniform that we were in for combat training, or we would be put in like military fatigues, which I remember them being like the Vietnam era clothing, but it was and some of them were a little big on us. So it was like they were just using what they already had on hand when we would do like PT stuff. And that was normally before we ever went there. But the first time we went to a place called Randall Park Mall. So there's a location known as Randall Park Mall. This is the mall that most of the people that were my age got trained in, some people that were older than me. So we would go to Randall Park Mall. The interior of Randall Park Mall around the time where they would take us was closed down. So they had certain big name brands that you could you can enter in, but it would only be from the outside into that location. And then so like say it was Macy's, for instance, you would go into Macy's from the outside and then you would exit back to the outside. But all the interior of the mall was closed down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can you tell me? Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, go ahead.
Can you tell me what grade were you in? Where this school is located in the state? How old you were? Those kind of things.
Sure. So the Desert Adventist Academy is located in California. I was around 8, going on 9, around the time I was being trained. The individuals, so it was like that was that. And what else was your question? What was your other question?
What grade were you in?
I was in the 3rd grade at the time.
Wow. Okay, I just wanted to lay down those basics. Are you able to do screen control and like maybe pull up the school and pull up Randall Park Mall and pull up all this stuff?
I don't like I have hold on.
Thanks. I'm glad you took a.
Like I don't have like photos set up specifically for that, but I have like photos of memories I have for those locations.
Can you just get on Google Image and just show me where you think this place is that had the jump gate, Randall Park Mall, Desert and Venice? And mind you, I'm not trying to nitpick for inconvenience. I simply want airtight discussion for any skeptics. You get what I'm saying? I'm not trying to bust your ass or anything, okay?
Sure, no problem. Hold on one
Okay,
second.
cool, yeah.
Let's see.
Wow, I thought you were. See, I'm glad you pulled it up. I wrote down Desert in Venice. Okay, Desert Adventist. Okay, so this was the school.
Yeah, so this was the entrance. Originally, it didn't look like this because it was still a small school until around the 3rd or 4th grade, like in transition between the 3rd or 4th grade. That's when they started really building out this school. So it's a lot bigger than it originally was. But yeah, so this is what it looks like now.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, now that people see this, they can Google it. Okay, pull up this Randall Park Mall for me.
Sure.
And after Randall Park, and you go over it and you tell me where you were over there, I'm going to have you maybe show me, if you can, show me this place via Google Earth where this jump gate was by LAX. And then I'm going to let Raymond jump in, ask you a couple things that he and I are going to go back and forth and ask you some stuff. Again, Joseph, I really appreciate you doing this. I know it's tedious, but.
That's all good, man.
Okay, cool.
So Randall Park Mall,
Look at that.
this is, let's see, map. So the Randall Park Mall no longer exists. Like it's been demolished at this point.
That's fine. Yeah.
Um, I don't know if they still have it on here since it's been demolished.
What town was this in?
Uh, I just know it's Randall Park Mall, but it's I'm trying to think. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Let's go to Wiki real quick. That should say where it is. It was a shopping mall located in the village of North Randall, Ohio. So it's located in Ohio.
So hold
So
on.
we would take a,
You would get picked up in California,
yeah, we would get picked up in California.
go to a
We would
jump,
go, we
and then
would go to a location where they would have a parking garage. We would get out of the white van. Normally we would get changed. The first time we went there, we didn't get changed because they were doing different things, right? But, and I can get into that in a second, but once they took us there, there was a jump gate. I don't remember like how all that worked because I don't haven't gotten those memories back at the jump gate portion. I just know that we went through a jump gate, and when we did, it would take us straight to the park to Randall Park Mall, to that actual mall location.
that's not a problem. Show me if you can this base or this area you think, if you can recall, by LAX where this jump gate was, and take me.
So that location, I don't like. James had like brought it up on Google Map in one of our interviews. I just forgot
Not a
where he
problem.
placed it. So
James already did the work for me. James already pulled it up or pulled up something close to it.
yeah, he already pulled it up in
We've
my
done
last interview.
airtight. Okay, not a problem. Now I'm going to pass the torch to Raymond. Let him ask one of his questions, and we'll go back and forth. Raymond, please.
First of all, I admire, very much respect what you're doing. Thank you so much. It's voices like yours and mine and so many others out there and this community that needs to be built that can be for better tomorrow for generations to come, especially with this plan and event taking place, everything that the Secret Space Program and governmental provinces are doing behind hidden technology. This is a little bit more anecdotal and speculative, but in etymology and history, for example, I'm going somewhere with this. Bear with me. Thank you so much. You hear a lot about saints, prophets, ancient schooling and mysticism. Yogic science is now getting more specific of finding a way into our clear nature, our true selves using the pineal gland, chakras. And I notice a lot of this has to do with steering away our true light of evolution. A lot of it has to do with a steering evolution per se. You know, in your words, just briefly, but in your way, in whatsoever, why is this steering evolution taking place? Why do they feel it's needed? Why so away from our original destination, what it could have been?
Because you're all slaves. I mean,
Yes.
we all are basically. That's the point.
Yes.
The human race is a slave species, and we're meant to be used. We're basically a commodity,
Yes. Yes. It's good.
and the people that are in charge, that's what they want. And if you say, for instance, are able to tap into your abilities, it throws people off because then they start realizing that they're not as helpless as they think they are, you know. And if they direct people to not only believe that they're not as powerful as they are, that they only have a certain way of life, they're going to follow that way of life. It's, you know, it's just in our DNA to explain it.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. What were they searching for, or looking for in these candidates that they were training anyway?
It just depends. Most of it dealt with bloodlines. Um, so if you have a specific bloodline that you're tied to that has certain genetics, like say from Anunnaki, like what they call the Anunnaki, which is basically Jahami, um, they interbred using technology with humans um, later on down the track. And what it did is it created, you know, a subspecies of the human species. And you have individuals that are known as, say, star seeds that are able to come in and enter into those bodies because it has a higher, they have more abilities that they can use basically. So the bloodlines that they have set up, when you come in, your soul itself has a certain level of abilities that it can use, whereas the body itself that you inhabit only has a certain percentage that can be used. So it just depends on how much people put in an effort to, say, increase certain aspects of certain blood, basically certain individuals. So say you had a very powerful psychic family and you had another powerful psychic family and you put them together. That's why you have like these bloodlines that were created. You can actually create a more powerful individual if they know how to activate themselves. Normally what they did is they would use rape to do so as children, because when you're a child, you, how do you explain it? When you're a child, basically, it's a lot easier to compartmentalize the abuse. Whereas if you take an adult and do what they try to do in the MK Ultra program originally, most of those people either go crazy or they die, or they might make it, but they're not ever going to be the same.
Wow. Does that answer your question?
Definitely, yes.
Wonderful. Joseph, can you tell me about this Project Ibis? Is that what you said? Is it Iris or Ibis?
Ibis, Project Ibis. So Project Ibis, from what I can remember, when I was a baby, I was taken out of my crib. Like, I have memories of being basically taken by this woman who was dressed in a Nazi uniform.
Wow, so this predates all this 8-year-old Desert Adventist. Okay, so you had
Yeah,
that were prior.
yeah. So I gained those memories like a little later on.
Wow.
Um, like after we had spoken and stuff. Like, I think it was like around the third interview I did, which I think was with Penny. Like after that, I ended up like starting to gain more and more and more memories of different things. So um, basically what it was is this woman came and took me out of my crib, and I was taken to this base. And hold on one second. Let's see. I was taken to this base, right? And when I was taken to this underground base, I don't know where it was located. Um, but I was basically raised there. Let's see. I was basically raised on this at this base. They originally had me in like this white room, and there was a crib. So it kind of basically looked something like this picture right here. So they had a one-sided mirror, so they could watch, and they would have a Nazi officer that normally would be wearing a different kind of uniform, but he had the swastika on his left arm, and they would come in, they would check on us. Eventually, they decided that they were going to bring in these animals. So what they did is first they had us watch this video that they put on, and it was on a screen, and we had to sit there and watch. So they would have a guard that would be there in the room with us, and he looked like the MI6 Special Forces, but they had on the left hand side of their chest area, they had an SS ruin symbol, and they would watch us. But they played a video with the Queen of England, right? And then what they did after that is they brought up a wolf. So Michael Prince or James Casbolt, for instance, remembered it morphing into that her face morphing into a wolf, but I just remember it flashing into a wolf. You know, that's pretty much just semantics at this point, but that's just what I recall. Then they would, then after that, it would say mother. Then the word mother would flash on the screen. Like, this is part of them basically brainwashing us as children. And then what they would do is they would play a video of basically SS soldiers marching in the streets in full color. And what it looks like to me now, when I saw it, as I go back and remember the memory and look through the memory and stuff, it's basically on repeat.
Well, Joseph, what's
But
the with a 30,000-foot view of this? Without, I mean, why are they snatching kids, and why the whole subliminal message deal? What is this? What outcome are they trying to provoke?
Sure. For Project Ibis, they were trying to create the Ubermen. So they were trying to create the super soldier, and they were trying to bring about a group of MK Ultra, basically super soldier kids, that they could activate their abilities and that they can bring about the 1,000-year Reich.
Okay. Do you think that was happening on a different timeline? You think?
No, that was, I mean, they basically took us out of time and like time and space, but we were still here in this time. It's just they took us from different times and brought us at that point. And what they did is, like for instance, after that whole thing that I talked about, they would bring in animals. So it would depend on which animal they were going to bring in, but they would play that video. And then, like for me, they brought in a wolf pup, and we had to live with this wolf pup in this crib, and like they would put food and we would play and basically bond. And as we were bonding, it allowed us to take on the attributes of these animals. So being able to sniff, uh, you know, have acute senses like hearing and smell, um, and even be able to morph into these animals. Because
One's
what they
genetic,
did is,
huh?
huh?
How does one's genes do that? I heard, what is her name? Elena Ka talk about that. That's something that, I'm a huge advocate for y'all and I'm a sympathizer and I believe all this stuff, but I'm having the hardest time with that factor, how people can morph into something. Can you, if you can't, don't worry, we'll move on to, I think Black Mantis is next one to talk about, but if you can, how can one's DNA change on the fly and just, or is that even what's happening? How can someone go from human to a wolf or bat? Like, how does that happen?
So the way that they did it is that we had to live with this animal, and then what they would do is they would starve us, and then they would bring in, say, another child that they had living with a different kind of animal. Like, say, one the one child that I dealt with, that they brought into the crib with me, uh, was watching basically, say George Bush, for instance, was on there, George Bush Sr., and then he would morph into an anaconda, I think it was. And what they did is they had an anaconda in the crib with that child, and then they brought that child by himself into my crib, and we were both by ourselves. And then they basically put some food in there after they had starved us. And what it would do is it would cause some kind of genetic uh, alteration in us, when we would become more primal. And it just dealt with like a primitive way where you go to reach for the food and your instincts kick in. And from being bonded with the animal that we were bonded with, basically like this kid's face just, and it was only like a split second. It wasn't like continuous the whole time. It was like a split second. Like his face phased into like an anaconda as it hissed at me, and then went back to him being a child as he grabbed the food.
Deal. It wasn't some sort of like this person is now permanently this with all its.
No, no, no. It was like that basically, just a split second, and then it just went back to him being himself. Um, but after that point, right, they they were they were trying to see how many different animals attributes we could take on, and that was the point of it. But the other spot was is that the individuals that they took had either angelic souls, seraphim souls, or archangel souls. Okay, and that was the whole point of the program. And the reason why I know that is because when the base was basically attacked by another faction, and they started killing off the guards and stuff. And when they were killing off the guards, uh, this the officer that was there, see real quick if I can bring it up. The officer that was there came into the room, and there were some other kids. I didn't want to go into that much visual because it just isn't something that people should see from my point of view. But there was other little kids that were in the room with me, and there were people there were shooting happening, and I was a little older at that point, but um, this officer had come in and started like basically shot like one or two of the kids in front of me. And then as that was going on, he went to go level his pistol at me. And I was able to use my abilities, my telepathic abilities, to basically jump into his mind to try to stop him from shooting me. And when I did, it threw him off because I hadn't done that before. And I was able to read his mind, and that's where I got that information. And later on, it was validated from another person that went to meet James Casbolt at one of the talking things that happened in Vegas, I guess, in like 2015 or 16 or sometime around there. But this lady had talked about the same exact thing, and how basically James Casbolt is the Archangel Michael. His soul is. He believes that it's a walk-in, but it's not. It's like it is his soul. There's a lot of people that don't believe that, but it's whatever. You know, they believe that. I know that to be true, and it's just it is what it is. You know.
Got you at all, Joseph. That's why I sought you out.
Yeah, and then it's so after that, like the place got attacked, we got taken to another offsite location. You can look up like James Casbolt stuff. He has different photos for actual locations that were in Canada, because we were basically taken to Canada at that point. I don't know where we were located at that base, but we were taken to Canada. There was a bunch of kids that were there. Supposedly there was only like 42 or something like that. Beforehand there was a lot more, but they killed a lot of the kids because they didn't want these people that came, that we believed at that point were saving us. You know, who really knows? Honestly, they could have just been, you know, storming the place so that we would believe that they were the heroes and we would help them to fight the bad guys, you know? Because when you're kids, that's the way your mindset is. You know, you want to be good for the most part, right? Well, later on, this is the individual I call number 42, because he ended up being part of these different units. They live on a military base, and they basically hunt down aliens that are not supposed to be here. So like if you travel here and you're not supposed to be here on this planet, they basically send us in as a unit of normally like 5 or something like that to go and execute these aliens. And we track them down and we kill them, and we have our own abilities and stuff. James Casbolt's gone into that. A lot of his memories are tied in with mine, which is kind of crazy, because when they took him, he was a kid. But when I first met him in his first on his first interaction outside of the base, like on an actual mission, I was actually older than he was, and the person that was in charge of me had told me that he was basically in charge of the unit, and that we had to protect him at all costs. And we went after this wolf being. It was like a humanoid wolf being, and I ended up letting this being go, and that ended up biting me in the ass later. This altar that I was in, that clone body that the altar was in, ended up getting in trouble because that being couldn't get off the planet. So he ended up coming and working for the people that we were working for, and I got in a lot of shit for it because he showed up on the base, and then they basically called me out for letting him go, and I got punished. But basically, those individuals live on a base. They've lived on the base even now to date, and they go on missions and they kill individuals that say like Max Spears, for instance, was one of the individuals that they actually went out and assassinated. Max Spears was also there as well as a part of Project Ibis or Project Manic, and it's the same. You know, it goes hand in hand. But his own clone was there in the unit that we went in to kill Max Spears. I have memories of the whole situation that happened with that. And this is basically the unit that I was with, which is all of these individuals, which are public, which is awkward, but
That's you in the middle,
this
huh?
is, yeah, this is me.
To the left.
This is
Zinder.
another dude that's public, Zinder. Jaco is a part of that unit. What's his name? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But anyways, yeah, he's a part of that unit. He's a public person too. And then also Max Pierce was the one that was leading that unit, that hit squad unit at that time. But we also went and tracked down, like I said, aliens. So this photo right here is an actual photo that I stumbled across. And this alien head is actually one of the beings that we tracked down and killed. I'm still trying to remember what the location was, but we had, so the units that we were a part of on the base were interchangeable, just depended on what the mission was and what beings we were going up against. Most of the time, we kept with the same units. At this being that we did hunt down, as you can see, like it's like the eyes are sunk in, its head was ripped off, and that was because Anthony Zender, his altar that is a part of that unit, he collects these beings' heads. For some weird reason, he got into taxidermy on the base, and the individuals would come to do the cleanup, and they got used to there not being any heads every time we hunted these creatures down. So
That's cool.
it was a weird circumstance. Like, it freaked us all out too, because I have memories of just the feelings that altar was going through, as well as everybody else on the base. They were freaked out because he was like losing his shit, because we could see what's going on TV and stuff, but most of us can't leave the base unless we go on a mission. James Casbold or Michael Prince, whatever you want to call him, he was the only person that could actually leave the base. So I found that pretty weird. But the reason why he came out was because of us, because we were like, hey, man, we're tired of doing this shit. We're tired of killing all these beings. And, the rest of the population doesn't even know we exist. And it's not even about notoriety. It's just, it just sucks doing it on our own. You know what I mean? But this is an actual photo. And I stumbled across this photo when I stumbled across when I came across, somebody had directed me to the audiobook for Agent Buried Alive, which is James Casbold's book, which totally like activated a lot of my memories, which freaked me out. And that's how I got a whole bunch of memories back. But this is actually one of the heads of the beings, and that thing that is in his head, Zinder had picked it up off the ground as we were walking through, because there was a little housing area, because it was like this being was hiding in a cave, and it was basically picking off the population that was there, wherever this location was. And as we were walking back, he picked this thing up, stuck it in the head so he didn't have to hold it. And when he did, these kids, this kid and this kid right here, were playing outside. And he took the head and was like, moved the mouth, was like, to mess with the children, basically. And it freaked them out, and they ran in the house. And I got tired of it, so I was like, we were talking back and forth, and I was like, hey, man, you want to see something cool? Let me see the head, and he's like, it's my head. And I was like, just let me see the head. And, he finally handed it to me, and I tossed it over the fence, which is the fence that's right here behind this guy. And this is their dad, I believe. So I tossed it over the fence, and he was like, that was mine. And the other guy, which was I think it's John Fritz or Fritz, I'll just call him Fritz, is the other guy that was part of that unit. And he was like, hey, you shouldn't do that. We can get in trouble. And he was like, you need to go get it. And I was like, screw it. Who cares? I was like, they're backwater yokels. It's not like they have cameras. Joke's on me on that end, they actually had a YouTube video where they had an interview done, and this guy brought this head out, and that YouTube video was removed.
Oh, I was about to ask, where is it?
Yeah, it was removed. They had a link. I have to go search through it, but they had a link, and it just goes to an empty link. Basically, they took it down. But they had the head, and the reason why the eyes are sunken and stuff like that, it's decaying, is because they didn't put it on ice, right? So the stick that this other kid has that he's holding, that he's messing with the mouth and stuff, these kids had ran out and poked it with a stick, and they got all scared and shit. Well, in the process of Zinder, messing with these kids, Jaco, his altar, was like, hey, man, that's not cool, man. You shouldn't be doing that, because like on the base, he's like this preacher. So he has this little area where you can go and worship and stuff like that. And he likes to preach the word, but nobody ever goes in there, nobody that's part of the unit normally ever goes in there. But yeah, it's just weird having those memories. And like the only game that we have on the base is like a ping pong, like a pong game, where you have the little guys and the soccer ball, and you kick the soccer ball around.
Yeah.
That's the only game we actually have on the base. So I found that to be awkward, you know what I mean? But we have TV. We can see what's going on outside of the base. We just can't go outside of the base unless we're on a mission.
Which base?
I don't. So James Casbolt had shown a picture of the base, and that's the base that I remember being on. I just can't remember the name off the top of my head. So
if you had to guess, where do you think that base is?
I would assume either in Canada or England, because we were basically a part of some faction that was there, we called ourselves the agency, whatever the hell that means. So like anytime we would be like going into places, we would meet with the whoever the heads of the police departments were or whatever, and we would just show up and be like, hey, we're with the agency, and they would know like who we were. They didn't really know what we were about, but they knew that we existed, and it normally scared them. So like if you go to another country, they know who you are when you're going in to activate in their territory.
Wow. Raymond, you want to go for your second question?
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you, brother. Whenever I hear mention of the Nazis and the swastika, I'm sorely reminded of the correlation of Nyingmapa or Buddhism or the ancient schools, especially Tibet. I just this just strikes me, in a certain spot, from how they use this a lot from ancient schools and the turning of the heart concept. The swastika came from Buddhism and ancient schools of India, Hinduism, but before that. And it makes it so much clearer that they're trying to steer this way, even in the MD or the medical doctors, Kundalini, the serpent and everything, how they portray, the correct way of medicine and doctorate. So they want to make it so clear that this is the correct way. But a lot of what you mentioned reminds me of true shamanism and our ancient schools, in Native American, and or these ways of tapping in, like you mentioned. So they've gone out of their way to influence our pineal gland or our DNA, and our DNA is a reflection of our pure, clear light self. DNA and its morphology and its construction, everything about it, it can be changed about our brainwaves, through our brainwaves, like you mentioned. So a lot of trauma. Trauma is very strong, and it can be, leave us a karmic seed, so to speak. All the more why they can control the souls afterward and everything, because the soul never dies. And they found a way to use this all the more, soul trap, etc., etc. So through self-awareness, we can break out of this cycle. Ancient schools of Tibet and before that, even Egypt and Native America, have realized this. And so all the more now we're nearing an area where tribes and these ancient schools are becoming more and more eliminated, more harder to find. But I have to feel that through ancient ways, and as you said, we were a slave species. I have to feel that our souls are all connected to these alien extraterrestrials, animals, we're all in a way, one soul in a way. But when we enter these vehicles, these bodies, it can be so easily manipulated, especially with DNA. Our genealogy, our parents, it does leave a mark. It does change things when we enter these bodies. They finally mastered this way completely. In your opinion, in your wisdom, do you think, we as a human race can break out of this using ancient ways and our own nature, as one before it's too late?
So from what I can remember, because like I've also been like, I've had a point where I awakened at this point where I've had memories of being here before. So like I've dealt with loops. So like this is your guys's loop basically, and this would be the 5th time that you guys have been here on this planet living through this. And like when I was, so originally in my timeline, I'm in a total separate timeline that didn't have anything to do with this one originally. And the 5th time I was successful, we were actually successful to basically break away from a lot of the issues that were happening here. And we were able to wipe out a lot of the threats and the problems that are on the planet. But after that had happened, I made a deal where I was able to basically, what I wanted to do was to travel to other timelines to help free them. So when I originally remembered, this would have been my 6th, but I've actually been doing this a lot more than that at this point. I just don't remember all of them. And I'm able to like compartmentalize, what had happened in those timelines. There's a lot of different things that happen, from my recollection, we have a little while before it begins because there's going to be a battle basically where there's going to be 5 different hit locations that are going to happen all at once, and depending on how that battle turns out depends on where Earth's direction goes. But as individuals, say that you're like me basically and you've been fractured, basically you have soul shards that have been fractured as a child or whatever, because I know it can happen just with different traumas in life anyways, but specifically like people like myself, you would basically do stuff, from what I remember, is shamanic soul shard journeys, like shamanic soul gathering, and you basically have to use shamanism to bring back those soul shards. That you got to make sure they're yours. On top of that, when you go into doing that, but specifically, you want to work with somebody that knows what you're talking about and can actually work with you and understands what you're going through, which isn't easy, as not very many have or would even understand that process. But there are people that do know how to do it, and once you're able to integrate those altars, you'll start to get not only your memories back, but you'll be able to remember how those abilities work and be able to tap into those abilities. Not as strong as you did when you were in the programs, for instance, because of the simple fact that normally they had us on certain different drugs and stuff to enhance our stuff, or they had us drink this AI black goo, if we were, say, in Notchwaffen or certain different groups, which would enhance us. Like, sometimes they would take that black goo stuff and inject it into your back area, and that, certain people were a part of that program, and that was like a Hulk program where you're basically, you would rage out and, double, triple, quadruple in size, all sorts of different stuff. You know what I mean? So they've gone through and done a lot of that stuff. So, I mean, you're right on that point, and it's the trauma that brings out those abilities in individuals. And yes, there are alien species that have come here, say as star seeds, or even before that. It's just, you have different alien groups that, say, Penny's covered it, where they'll take their, their bad people that they don't want to deal with, and they'll kill them, and they'll be trapped on the planet. Basically, they'll be karmically entangled on the planet. But there is a human species that's here, that's legitimately the human species that are, as Penny has put it, young souls. And this is basically where this is like a nursery for young souls, for the human souls that are here on this planet. But you have beings that have come from outside and have messed with them, if that makes sense. Yes. So it's like we do have a connection where, yes, there are individuals that have alien souls that are here, that are inhabiting human bodies, but there are also just regular human beings that are here, that are supposed to go through their journey and their expansion, and grow in who they are as a creation. And the outside sources come in and messed with that and manipulate that for its own gain, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Joseph, I want to ask you, what is it? You said there's a project Black Mantis or Black Manta?
Yeah, so I have some memories, like not too much, of this new project. It's called Black Manta, but there's these underground bases, and from what I've come to realize, Black Manta is basically part of the Black Navy, which is a Black Ops area within the Navy, and this is the way it's been explained. But there's these underground bases in the water, like it's in the water.
Yeah, Phil Schneider, are you familiar with Phil Schneider?
Yes, I do know who Phil Schneider is.
I mentioned the reason why nuclear bombs are going off in the ocean is they were nuking island chains, turning them into atolls like the Bikini Islands and things like that. Is that true? Do you validate that?
From what I know, what Black Manta does is they shoot off these missiles and they open portals. And what they do is these fish creatures will come through, and then what they'll do is they'll capture them, take their genetics, and then they'll take a human, like basically myself or others,
like a chimera, splice them.
And they'll splice it into a humanoid chimera, and the people the beings that are leading it are Nordics, so they're like basically they lean towards the evil side of the spectrum, if you would go off of good and evil or whatever. But they're trying to create an Uberman seafaring species, humanoid species. So they're trying to create like a super soldier, kind of like the mermaids, basically, but a human form.
Wow. Okay, I asked one. Raymond, you want to know?
This right here is, so somebody had drawn this symbol, and James had shown me it, and I basically took it from what I remembered. And these are Mason hammers, but this is basically the logo that I recognized from Black Manta, which is two Mason hammers crossed.
What would that symbolize? I don't know how that's oceanic or maritime at all.
You know, it just depends. I mean, there's a lot of different organizations that are a part of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Raymond, why don't you ask another one? You have another question?
Yes, sir. So you mentioned the concept of, and it's fascinating to me, and it's actually very informative because I, like you and my brother Zen, want to find a way to calmly and gently, but find a way to overthrow this war of consciousness one day, especially if we don't, we're going to be a complete slave species with no way out, really, and/or waiting a few thousand, if not more, cycles for this to even integrate and change again for our next cycle, our next bodies, and etc. You know, like you said, there's so many cycles of this. I have to dissect this so many beautiful spiritual ways. You said a lot of these are truly, in my words, I'm sorry, they're not as elegant as yours, but baby human souls. How does that come to be from the universal ether of spirituality and/or the universal ether of energy? New souls and their babies and these alien souls. How does interaction really have anything to do with the event? Like, what are they planning with these? Like, what does it have to do with? Like,
so baby souls are basically newborn souls, whereas you have, like, say, a lot of the alien souls that come here, they've been around for a long, long time. So they have more memories on a soul level than what you would have for a newborn soul. I don't really know too much about it, like, other than that portion, but I would just direct you to watch Penny's stuff, because she has a lot more knowledge on that stuff, because she's dealt with a lot of different groups and has done a lot of research into that. But what it basically relies down to is you have newborn souls that have just come into fruition, and this is a planet for them. And then you have us that are exterior souls that have been around for a long time, and we basically came here, or we were dropped here and killed here to reincarnate here. We're like the dumping ground basically for either our solar system or other solar systems in the galaxy or outside of our galaxy, depending on what beings travel here. And it's like, people call it a soul trap or whatever, but it's set up specifically so that those souls don't get off and go into other places, because they're not ready for that, I guess. And that's the way that it's been kind of explained. But I mean, other than that, that's all I really know about that per se. I know, like, I have memories of who I truly am. And I remember, like, I had to guard this sector of this, like, basically the solar system was part of what I had to guard. And there were beings that came in, and they were known as the Dark Ones. And what they did is, when I called in backup to come in to help me fight them, they set up a trap, and those individuals decided just to go straight in, and they destroyed their ships, causing it to crash, and they basically became karmically entangled to the planet. So, like, once you die here, you're just karmically entangled basically until you can either get off the planet and go elsewhere and die, or basically just get off the planet in general. But it's mainly so that they don't get off the planet without having grown enough into understanding how they should act out in space. But then again, though, there's alien beings that act just like we do. So it's, that I don't know for sure if I fully accept that portion of it, because it's like, we're dealing with beings that sell us into slavery,
right,
for technology. So, like, our own people are working with other beings to sell us for technology, which in a way, if you're trying to level the playing field technologically, we're getting the shaft anyways, but they think they're getting a good deal with the stuff they're being given, but they're really not. But it's like, we're already spread out. So, like, the human species won't necessarily die off completely, but it's just like, it just depends on what kind of lifestyle you think would be worth living, because for me, yes, you have the human slaves that are on the planet, and then you have your slave weapons. Myself and a lot of other people are basically slave weapons for these other beings. But what it really relies down to is that you have different alien factions that are using us as covert war for their covert wars. And we're basically just taken because we can build stuff for them. We can back engineer things easily. You know, it takes time, but we can figure it out. And we're willing to do whatever we're ordered to do,
Right.
you know, out in space. So it's like they know a lot more than we do, and we think that they're gods. And that's where a lot of our religions come from, is these beings coming here and having their abilities already, because they've had generations and generations through their species to actually grow their abilities and know how they work, where they want to keep us down so that they can keep control of us. And we do that as well with these different factions out in space, these other human factions that do this stuff. We do this to other beings on other planets in space.
Right.
And that's been talked about by, like, say, Jason Rice and other people. And just from my memories, I mean, this is what we do. And so, like, the breakaway that happened for the German faction, which is Notchwaffen, goes around and we work for the Draco, or we, as in general, like, they work for the Draco, and they go around and collect their tax, or they go around and try to get resources and do their own stuff. But what it really relies down to is we're never going to get broken away from being slaves. It's just at what level of oppression we're going to live under. So the Draco are still going to be in charge of this planet at large, because they're an empire. And it would be really hard to take out their empire. And the level of ruthlessness that they use to subdue species, if they can't work with you, they'll just destroy you.
Right.
Okay, so that's what we're up against on that level. But then you have the Jahami, who actually own the planet. So we got to deal with that as well. So we have like a bunch of,
I'm sorry, the
it's
Jahami.
like
Never interrupt. I'm so sorry, but the Jahami, you said, or
Jahami. There's Jahami. So that what we know is the Anunnaki. They're called Jahami.
If you don't mind, tell us about that. Tell us who they are, where they're from. I've already asked Penny Bradley this, but let me hear it from you. Give us a breakdown about that. So basically, they have a lease on this planet, a lease from the reptilian species, and the reptilian species basically just claim their stake and say, you know what, fuck it, we own Earth, no one can keep us in check. And out of that, their quasi or pseudo ownership, this, I guess, sub-race, but still above humankind, the Jahami, aka Anunnaki, they lease this, I guess, from the reptilians, but don't want us to know that. That way we think they're superior, or there's always like
I would say that it would be just like if you bought a house, you still got to pay taxes, right?
servitude.
So, I mean, if you were going to make it really simplified, the Draco Empire is basically the tax collectors, and they own the land that your house sits on, but the Jahami own the house, if that makes sense. So it's like, just replace the house with the planet, but they own the solar system that planet resides in. So therefore, they can just come in if you don't pay your tax and just take your stuff. I mean, that would be the simplest form.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
But I mean, the Jahami in general, it just depends. They don't all look humanoid either. There's other beings that are reptilian that are part of the Anunnaki as well. So it's like, it's not all like a humanoid species.
Just going back to like Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Yeah, I would probably say so. I mean, if I was going to speculate, for sure. Yeah. I mean, just memories that I have from who I truly am, like, basically that's what I would be considered, would be a Jahami or whatever. But I don't really know 100%. Like, the being that I am, I can go in between time and space. Like, my ship is in between time and space, right? And I'm just sitting in a chair, and my soul is here in this body now, and I'm basically living a humanoid life. But we're able to alter genetics, through etherical ways, and we're able to go back and forth in time whenever the hell we feel like it. So it's like, it's weird to explain, but like, the beings that are in charge of this planet have their own council that oversees it, and it's just, we're gonna have to play by their rules.
Joseph, what is this council?
It's like, there's a dude that's in charge mainly, and then there's like a bunch of other ones. But if you just look back in history on all these different major beings, like these major gods, that's who the Jahami are. So it's made up of those individuals.
Just give me an example.
Such as what? Like,
How
you
about
want
you?
it like a,
If we look back at these guys, you're saying just give me one example of this.
sure. I mean, you could look back at, what the heck is that shit called? I mean, just look back historically, just at the Anunnaki, the big giant beings that came here. That's who they are, man.
Nebuchadnezzar, all that. Those emperors of Mesopotamia.
Those would probably be their children, yeah.
Those would be their children. Okay. All right. I've asked a bunch of what we're tag teaming. What else did you want to ask? You have a whole rap sheet.
Yes, 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 indeed.
But like Penny would know more about that than I would. So
No. It's fine. Yeah, no. Of course, we're just asking you while we got you.
So you mentioned the technology a lot, and as it's mentioned a lot in general. This technology, to your point of view and your knowledge, also can be merged with our own spirit, or say our own vibration. I hear a lot about how this technology is a lot of sometimes more advanced, and it's interesting that you mentioned like a lot how these beings, even at the most advanced stages, in ancient schools of mysticism in Tibet and Nyingma, forgive me, that's where my field is, you know, the ancient schools, Tibetan yoga, you know, and Nyingma, they talks a lot about how, like a school, very similar to what you're saying. And so I admire what you're saying in general, how like basically like a school, university, and at the top, you can always ascend, live like 500 years, 1,000, 2,000, but you can still drop all the way down again if you're not careful upon your decisions, upon what you're doing, you know. And so a lot of times they'll fall upon pride still, no matter what, how old they are, you know. And you mentioned that the Anunnaki and all of this, these concepts, do you think no matter what, we could still integrate into our pure nature selves? Like, for example, they can fall, very fall, if we integrate everything, like you said earlier, no matter what, it's not too late to integrate our very true selves. Would you agree, or what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I would agree. I mean, basically what you're talking about is the law of karma.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Right.
yeah, which is basically universal law.
Yes, sir.
And that's the way it really works out there. So, I mean, when I served on the Ashtar Command, they didn't have like religion like they're trying, like other individuals have hijacked,
Right.
and stated like, oh, Jesus, like there was no Jesus on that ship. So it was like you had individuals, basically these beings, these extraterrestrials that were really advanced, but they dealt with the law of karma. So they didn't want to do anything that would karmically entangle them into certain things. Okay, so they would try to, get away from pride and envy and stuff like that. You know what I mean? From what I remember when I served on the ship with them, and like I didn't even want to leave. I wanted to stay with them. So they sent me back. They were like, "No, you have a mission here," and
Exactly.
I don't want to go back. I was like, "What if they get me?" Because like this planet is ran by what is known as the Dark Ones. So it's like we're under their reign and their rule and whatever they want to do to us. You know what I mean? So does that make sense? Like that's basically what it's all about. Like you basically have to try your best not to be like karma is more than just that. Like if you die and you've committed a certain amount of atrocious karma, I mean, you're going to have to live with that. You don't die and go and live in an animal, from what I remember. You get reborn as a human, but you're going to have a shittier life. You're going to be born into a shittier situation, basically.
Right. Yes.
But then again, I mean, it can vary. You can be born into a rich family in your next life and be a total complete piece of shit, you
Right.
know? And
Ancient schools, some are reborn into animals, dolphins, etc. And no matter, as long as their heart is constant and protection or dharma, as we like to say, no matter what we can overcome, I have to see that as an inspirational, motivational fact. I say for the human race and races in general, I would really, really hope that no matter what, like you said, the law of karma is impenetrable, no matter how high one evolves or how low one, even a demon, and that's a very broad word. It can be so interchanged, so many things, and I get that. But in general, whether it be angelic, seraphim, demonic, I have to believe that there's some way we can always, as long as we use self-awareness, we can tap into that universal mind as one when this time comes. I really appreciate you. Your wisdom is beyond words. Thank you.
I think a lot of people have like this misconception because I mean there are beings that are coming and screwing with people, and then there's people that are screwing with other people using technology where they think ascension is that we're just going to leave our bodies and like go somewhere else. I mean, the whole point of what's happening is if we win, we can go out into space, but it's like, and you'll be able to tap into your abilities and you won't be hindered as much. You know, these beings use different things to try to hinder us as a species, and hinder our abilities. All humans have different abilities that they can use. It's just they can't tap into it at this point because they weren't, you know, brought up in, say, the schools that you're talking about. They don't go and try to, you know, live that kind of lifestyle and tap into those schools of knowledge, those pools of knowledge. You know what I mean? They just try to survive at this point, which is basically what most people are all about doing at this point, is just trying to put food on the table for themselves or their family or whatever. They don't even think about, you know, being able to use telepathy. They think that when they see that in the movies, it's a joke, you know? Whereas like, I mean, you could just go look up like the, you know, the Shaolin monks. I mean, look what they do. I mean, just with their bodies in general. I mean, they've shown how far you can push the human body.
Yes, sir.
People see that and they're in shock and awe, but they still don't want to go and deal with that. They don't want to go do that themselves, you know? And then you also have to take into consideration a lot of these schools that do stuff like that, they're being wiped out by whoever the governing system is in that location.
Even in Tibet, 1950s, exactly. That's what happened. That's why the monks nowadays are not to be seen rarely. That's why I said to the south, my brother. But yes, yeah, sad. Yeah.
See, like I have memories of being trained by Shaolin monks, but I don't know if it was here on Earth or not. Like, because you have to take in consideration there's humans that are on other planets with other, you know, just other colonies that don't even know we exist, you know? So like these different factions have different colonies on other planets and stuff like that. So it's like, we have a lot of different things that are going on, but I remember being trained by Shaolin monks to hone my abilities and skills. I also remember, you know, learning my abilities through trauma. Mainly it was trauma based, you know, which is a self-protecting mechanism. So like if you're being beaten to death, your true self, say your higher self, whatever you want to call it, you know, I wouldn't say if it's good or bad, to be honest, from my point of view. It's like that higher self will allow a splicing and create a splice of your soul, right? So that you have an alternate personality.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
So that the body survives.
Exactly.
Because it wants to live through your life. And if it has to create other ones like you with just different names, it'll live through that life. Okay. I also believe that not only that, but you as say your higher self also has a higher self.
Right.
You know, so it's like all the way up to source or whoever the main creator being is of all this shit that we're living through, you know, like it wants to live through us and we want to live, you know, it's like, it's just.
And all these in a way are different experiences.
Ongoing.
Learn those experiences, which creates.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the point of it? I don't know, honestly.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm glad it exists because I don't want to disappear, but you know.
Exactly.
Well, you know? we are at an hour and 15. I'd like to pause here if you don't mind.